Hello, my lovely friends. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Yani. If you're new, welcome. So, in today's video, I'm going to be convincing you to read my favorite books based off of my favorite quotes in those books. How exciting! Okay, I actually got this idea from another YouTuber. Her name is Vanisha Marie. And when I saw it, I was like, this is absolutely brilliant. So I'm just totally copying that idea. I'm not sure if it's her idea or if she found it from someone else, but it's not my idea. I put it out there. But I just think it's so fun. Quotes are one of the things that will make a book for me. The writing, things that resonate, things that I love enough to highlight, like that's for me, like that will make a book for sure. So I kind of just went through my bookshelves, randomly selected the things that I already knew were favorites, and then I just have them stacked in a pile in the order that I just kind of grabbed and saw them on my bookshelf. So let's just go ahead and get started with the first book, and that is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Now, this is a book about a man in the 1950s who finds himself between the crossroads of convention and morality because he starts to have homosexual awakening. Okay, but this is one of those books that it's like, essential reading, essential reading. But I'm just gonna look to see what I highlighted here. I'm literally just gonna open up to a random highlight. This is page 103. You can see that I underlined. I wondered about them. I wondered how they had done it, the physical act. I had thought of suicide when I was much younger, as possibly we all have. But then it would have been for revenge. It would have been my way of informing the world how awfully it had made me suffer. But the silence of the evening as I wandered home had nothing to do with that storm, that far off boy. I simply wondered about the dead because their days had ended and I did not know how I would get through mine. And then another quote from the book is on page 92. It's a much shorter quote, but I think it's powerful. It says, "He made me think of home. Perhaps home is not a place, but simply an irrevocable condition." I thought that was a very interesting and unique feeling that was described rather well. So those are two quotes from Giovanni's Room. This was a super quick read. I do think this would make like my essential reading list as far as for study, for queer study, for just literature study, for cultural study as well. This is 1950s Paris as well, and some of the things that happened shocked me, but maybe they shouldn't have. So the next book has been making all of the rounds on social media, but I want to make it clear that I read this before the hype was big on social media. Okay, not that it matters, whatever. So that is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. I thought this was such an incredible book and such a confusing book at times as well. So this is basically about a girl, a young girl who is in an underground bunker with other women, and they're all kind of imprisoned there for the longevity of life, it seems, and they're watched by guards who are men who won't talk to them. And this girl, she has absolutely no context as to why she's there or what happened or why they're imprisoned or what's up with the world or what is the world. And this book was so quotable. I'm only going to really read one quote from here because I could read the whole book. The whole book is quotable, and it was so good that I didn't even highlight. As you can see, I just pointed arrows to the start and to the finish. I'm just going to read it to you. "I began to laugh, as much to my surprise as to anyone else's. I'd been used to respecting the women's wishes, especially those of the eldest who had the most authority. But everything had changed because I could no longer see any basis for that authority. I suddenly discovered that they had no power. We were all locked up in the same manner, without knowing why, watched over by jailers who, either out of contempt or because they were obeying orders, didn't speak to any of us. They wouldn't answer our questions, and we had long since stopped asking them any. The old women were as helpless as the younger ones. They had seized some imaginary power, a power over nothing, a tacit agreement that created a meaningless hierarchy. Because there was no privileges that they could grant or refuse, the fact is that we were all on an absolute equal footing." I love this because it's a girl gaining awareness, and I think this is so relevant to humanity and how we believe things that aren't real all the time. We buy into illusions, we buy into systems that are not real. We believe people have power over us who do not have power over us. And I loved the insightfulness that this girl showed and her monologue of awareness, like, wait, like, you might be older women and I might be a young girl, but we're all prisoners and you don't have any power over me. And I think that's so relevant and so important to be able to come to as a person. And so much of this book is framed in the thought process of this girl, and that was really the catalyst to her thinking. And I absolutely loved it. And that's the only quote I'm going to read from here because I feel like it suffices. So, I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. Kind of a little bit different. I have a poetry book. This is O Sleepur by Marty Schoenleber. I've never heard anyone talk about this book, but he writes incredible poetry. Now, I am not going to read you an entire poem. However, I am going to read you one line from a poem that just really resonates with me and that I feel like is an argument for why you should check out some of this poetry. And granted, I'm not a huge poetry person. I have some poetry, I've read some poetry, but it's not my medium. However, this is great poetry. So this is a poem that he specifically calls Push. You can see I highlighted the particular line. He says, "This is for the incapable, because you and me both are incapable. This is so you can look at me differently, like I was an amputee. And what I've had cut away was my expectations. I was supposed to be huge." That is so incredible to me. The way that he alludes this feeling of feeling less than or like a letdown or disappointed even in your own potential or in your dreams as being an amputee, and the limb you've lost is your expectations. I feel like that's such a beautiful metaphor. That's O Sleepur by Marty Schoenleber III. He has incredible poems. You can see that I've marked most of them, and I am not a poetry person, okay? I don't love poetry. This is the only poetry book that has made it on this list, and I particularly chose that because I feel like that's such a valid feeling that so many people could relate to. This next book that I'm going to be reading you quotes of is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I actually read this maybe a year and a half ago, and it was interesting. It was so interesting. Also another book that would make my essential reading list. But this is the story of two brothers and kind of like their respective legacies. But in summary, it's supposed to be a reinterpretation and sort of metaphorical analogy of the Cain and Abel story. I say metaphorical analogy because it's not overt. I thought it was going to be a lot more blatant than it actually was, but I see the symbolism there. This is a book that I didn't annotate though, so I will be looking up the quotes on Goodreads and will tell you which ones you should check out. I know there's one in particular that people quote all the time, so I think I'm going to reference that one. This is probably the most famous quote from this book. I think it's actually about one of the characters named Kathy. It's been a while. Well, not a while, but it's a big book, okay? It's like a 600-page book, so please don't blame me if it's not perfect. But the quote is this: "And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good." I see that quoted all the time, and with good reason, especially when you put it in the context of what the story is. It makes perfect sense, and I think that's a feeling that can resonate with a lot of people. It certainly resonates with me. I'm a recovering perfectionist, okay? I will definitely get in my own way in the hopes of being perfect, which no one can be. So I definitely understand this feeling of now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. You know, you do tend to self-sabotage in your perfectionism. So I get why that's so quoted and it's so relevant. And I think that in and of itself, knowing the context of the story, knowing it's a retelling of the Cain and Abel story, and that there's so many very interesting characters, especially that character Kathy that I mentioned. Just one more quote that I actually saw that I did highlight somewhere in there. It reads, "Perhaps the best conversationalist in the world is the man who helps others to talk." That's nice. I like that. I like that. That's true. A person who can help others find their voice is the best conversationalist. So just wanted to highlight that as well. Definitely check it out. Okay, we're getting through this pile. I'm gonna start moving a little bit quicker, okay? So this is Of Love and Other Demons by Gabriel García Márquez. I love Gabriel García Márquez. I've actually made it a goal to read as many of his books as I can, but this was the first and also one of my favorites. Now, this is about a 12-year-old girl in 18th century South America who gets bitten by a dog with rabies. Now, because of the time period that this was in, they didn't understand rabies, okay? They thought she was possessed by a demon, and so they ship her off to a convent to deal with her demonic possession. And while she's there, the priest, who's much older, kind of falls in love with her in, yes, definitely a predatory way, but it's so much deeper than that. Not saying it's right, but this isn't a predatory story, even though it's predatory. You know what I'm saying? But very beautiful book and very beautiful writing. So let me find one of the quotes that I have. I highlighted this quote here. Disbelief is more resistant than faith because it is sustained by the senses. I also highlighted this quote here. It is not that the girl is unfit for everything, it is that she is not of this world. Listen, I'm a little bit of a romantic, okay? That was romantic to me, okay? Look, I highlighted it and everything. It is not that this girl is unfit, it's that she's unfit for this world. Wow. If someone said that to me about me, I might fall in love. I don't know. But that is Of Love and Other Demons by Gabriel García Márquez. This next book is a classic. I'm sure it would be on a lot of people's list, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now, The Picture of Dorian Gray, if you don't know, is about a man who is beautiful. He's gorgeous, and somebody brings it to his attention that, hey, you're not going to be gorgeous forever. You're going to age, you're going to get old, and, you might be beautiful now, but you won't be beautiful forever. And this made him distraught. So I forget if he wished it or he willed it or what exactly happened, but he had this portrait of him and he made it so that the portrait aged instead of him. So he has this immortality while the portrait decays in his place. And beautiful writing, okay? Very beautiful writing, Oscar Wilde, like crazy. Quotes that resonate with me. Now, this copy I bought after ever reading it, so I don't have this one annotated. I will be looking through Goodreads for my favorite quotes. And funny enough, like once I see them, I'll know they're my favorite quotes because I remember. I just don't have it memorized, okay? So this quote, "You will always be fond of me. I represent to you all of the sins you never had the courage to commit." Also, to define is to limit. I think that one's quite, popular. I'm looking for my favorite quote in the whole book, and it's about confession. Here it is. It reads, "My dear Basil," cried Dorian, "what have you told me? Simply that you felt that you liked me too much. That is not even a compliment." It was not intended as a compliment. It was a confession. Again, it hits the romantic in me, okay? Like, oh, like I like you too much. Oh, well, that's not a compliment, it's a confession. That's passion, okay? To me, that's like solid yearning. So, the next one, The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. Listen, I feel like when a book gets hyped, a lot of people write it off because it's popular, but this book deserves 1000% of the hype. So, this is about an orphan girl during the Holocaust who gets taken in by a foster family who starts hiding a Jew in the basement. And she kind of develops a familial relationship with that Jew who helps her learn to read. And, she starts stealing books so that they can learn to read. And it's beautiful, and the book is narrated from the point of view of the Grim Reaper, essentially death as a concept and as an entity. And this has some of the most beautiful quotes, some of the most beautiful writing that I've ever come across in literature. I got this copy from the book depository before it went under RIP. I will be also finding the quotes from this off of the internet, but I recall specifically a couple that just, broke my soul when I was reading it. So I cannot wait to convince you to read this book by reading you some heart-wrenching quotes, okay? Starting off strong. "I have hated the words and I have loved them, and I hope I have made them right." Beautiful. Another one. "He does something to me, that boy. Every time. It's his only detriment. He steps on my heart. He makes me cry." And lastly, keep in mind again that this is death talking. "I have to say that although it broke my heart, I was and still am glad that I was there." What a beautiful book, honestly. What a beautiful book. I know when something's really popular and hyped, it can add hesitancy, but this is such a beautiful book that I think you should read. The next one is Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. So this is a vampire story, and this was actually the first vampire story that inspired Dracula. And this is about a female vampire called Carmilla. Now, this book I actually did annotate, I do believe, and it had such beautiful writing. What it is, it had really, really strong descriptions that, made the ambiance so good. So I just kind of flipped to a random quote. I didn't even look at it. "You will think me cruel, very selfish, but love is always selfish. The more ardent, the more selfish. How jealous I am, you cannot know. You must come with me, loving me to death, or else hate me and still come with me, and hating me through death and after. There is no such word as indifference in my apathetic nature." Those are some strong feelings. I think one quote is enough. Moving on. The next one, Call Me By Your Name by André Aciman. I have the movie version, the movie cover version. I don't care. Okay, this book is also beautiful. This book put words to feelings that I had not seen before. So this book is about a boy named, I forget his name. Is it Elio? One of them is called Elio. Anyways, this is about a kid, maybe like 18, a kid in the Italian countryside, and his parents are scholars, and every summer they invite another scholar to come and study with them in this Italian countryside. A kind of love affair comes around between him and Elio. Watch the movie trailer, actually, because I don't think I've done a great job explaining the plot. But it's more vibes. I would definitely say it's more vibes, and it's heartbreaking, okay? And it has some of the most beautiful descriptions of longing that I've ever come across. I literally underlined so much. I just gotta try to find one that I can just say one and go, because this video is getting kind of long for me. I smiled back faintly, knowing I was already clamming up, shutting the doors and windows between us, blowing out the candles, because the sun was finally up again and shame cast long shadows. What a incredible way to describe this feeling of shame. I don't personally feel shame over who I'm with or attracted to, but I understand feeling shame. And this book puts to words so many feelings. This book is worth a read, is absolutely worth going through and experiencing. This is an experience, okay? Some of the best writing that I've personally come across, and I definitely recommend it. Watch the trailer if you want a clearer picture of the vibes, but you really don't need to. You read it for the writing, if not for the plot. Next up, we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I love this book. Actually, I said that there was no order. However, I definitely picked my favorites up first. So really towards the end is probably more of my favorites, but it's too late now to undo the order. So Rebecca. This is about a young woman who meets this man called Maxim de Winter. And it's very quick and spontaneous. They kind of just get married, and he takes her back up to his estate. The thing is, once she gets to his estate, she recognizes that she cannot let go or live up to the shadow of his ex-wife, who was Rebecca. So she kind of is going about her life and her marriage as the new governess to this estate, feeling complete lack and inferiority to this man's dead wife. I really, really love this book, okay? I feel like it's a classic, but I don't actually hear a lot of people talk about this book, so I want you guys to read Rebecca. And the narrator is a very shy person. She's a very introverted person, so she has a lot of moments of deep reflection. And in particular, I'm only going to read one line if I can find it, but there's a part in the book where she is off to meet her grandmother-in-law, and she's having this inner monologue and reflection about, hey, this is an old woman who used to be lively, and just kind of having that thought process. So let me find that real quick, because I don't actually know where it is. I think it was just like a whole chapter in the book, so maybe I didn't make it a point to highlight it, but I should have. And I'm gonna try to find it, because it's such an eloquent, introspective moment for this character, and really representative of the kind of book that you're reading. Actually, I found it. Yes, okay. I literally just highlighted that, not highlighted, like pointed out that whole section. So this is page 206. I was a child yesterday. I had not forgotten, but Maxon's grandmother sitting there in her shawl with her poor blind eyes. I thought how little we know about the feelings of old people. Children we understand, their fears and hopes and make-believe. I was a child yesterday. I had not forgotten. But Maxon's grandmother, sitting there in her shawl with her poor blind eyes, what did she feel? What was she thinking? Did she know that Beatrice was yawning and glancing at her watch? Did she guess that we had come to visit her because we felt it right? It was a duty, so that when she got home afterwards, Beatrice would be able to say, well, that clears my conscience for the next 3 months. I wish that I could lay my hands upon her face and take the years away. I wish I could see her young as she once was, with color in her cheeks and chestnut hair, alert and active as Beatrice by her side, talking as she did about hunting, hounds, and horses, not sitting there with her eyes closed while the nurse dumped the pillows behind her head. I love this book. I think this is a super underhyped book, and whether or not somebody could say that about a classic, I don't care, okay? I love Rebecca. Is our main character kind of weak? Yes, but it's okay to read characters that are not perfect, okay? Read Rebecca. the penultimate book, and also the only book that is a young adult book in this whole list. I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This is quite literally the only young adult book who survived my teenage years into my adulthood as having such a high impact. So this is a book about a set of twins. One is named Jude, it's a girl. Another is named Noah, it's a boy. And they're super close when they're like 13, and then flash forward to when they're 16, they're not close anymore. They barely talk. And you get the 13-year-old version through one twin, you get the 16-year-old version through another twin, and then you're kind of bridging in the gaps about what happened that, led to their separation, their friction and everything that's been going on. And part of the reason that I love this book is because they're both artists, so they both have this like artistic soul within there. And also this book just has some absolutely incredible writing. So this is another one where I think I read it when I was like 14 or something. I loved it so much that I read it twice, and I haven't read it as an adult. However, the quotes are still immaculate. So this is what I want. I want to grab my brother's hand and run back through time, losing years like coats falling from our shoulders. That's one of the twins, Jude, I believe, describing this feeling of like longing for the way her and her brother used to be. So I believe through her point of view, we get the 16-year-old version, and then through his point of view, we get the 13-year-old version. And this just kind of illustrates how far apart they've grown. And then this quote, I remember reading it as a teenager and feeling so impacted, and it's still so good. He was the kind of man who walks into a room and the walls fall down. I, to this day, love that description. Definitely, like, again, the only young adult book to make it to this list, and it's earned its spot. I actually would love to reread it, but I'm kind of scared. I like don't want to taint the memory. I read it twice actually. So I read it when I was the respective ages, I believe, of both of the protagonists, and I think that made it special too, because at each age that I read it, I resonated with the character that was that age, and I feel like that's just a symbol of its good writing. So I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. And the last book, I'm sure if you've watched this channel or you know me in real life, you were waiting for this book to make an appearance, but that's Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. Now, I really love this book. Since the time that I've read it, have heard a lot of negative critique, and I don't care. So this is about a woman named Cleo and a man named Frank who also have a spontaneous marriage, and this book basically chronicles that marriage not working out. So, but there's one line in particular that I just know, like, there's so many quotes in here that I really love, but there's just one towards the end. And again, I've been very careful not to give spoilers with all of my quotes that I'm selecting, but I absolutely love this as a portrayal of love. So she was thinking of the day that she got out of the hospital. Frank had undressed her in the dark bathroom upstate, slipping her shirt over her uplifted arms as though she were a little girl. She'd put her hands on his shoulders as he'd knelt to pull her jeans off over her ankles and feet. She could feel the air whispering around her. He slid off her underwear. She stepped out of them gingerly. Her body felt drained of all sex. She was back to being a child. He rested his forehead on the slope beneath her belly button. She took his skull in her hands, his lovely curly hair sprouting between her fingers. Devotional. That was the word for two bodies like that. They should have been more devoted. She understood that now. I love this idea of devotion in a relationship, and I think that's why this quote struck such a chord in me, because it was such a visual and compelling scene. And I think Coco Mellors just has great writing, at least in this book. I haven't read her other book yet, it's a secret. But yeah, I think you should read Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I've heard the critique and I don't care, okay? And you shouldn't care either. You should formulate your own opinion. But that is it. Okay, my friends, I made it. That was a lot more than I thought, I'm not gonna lie. But thank you so much for watching with me. Did any of these quotes, did you like them? Did you have any intrigue in any of these books? I really hope so. These are all books that I highly recommend. I love all of these. I'm putting all of these on my essential reading list. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope that you will stick around, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.